Hello, I'm Kurma and welcome. In this edition, we're going to show you how to prepare a wide variety of international vegetarian cuisine from over 30 countries. And in this edition, we're going to show you how to prepare the first in this series of 3 Indian feasts, consisting of Bengali royal rice, yeasted puffed fried bread, Kamiri puri, and chana dal with potatoes. So let's begin. Bengali royal rice, pushpana, is one of Bengal's contributions to Indian vegetarian cuisine. Pushpana rice is actually the most famous Bengal festive rice dish. It contains all sorts of beautiful, colourful ingredients, hence the name pushpana. Ana means grain and pushpa means flower. It's said that a dish of pushpana rice resembles a beautiful basket of flowers because it's so attractive and colourful. Actually, it's a very rich and elegant dish, which is not an everyday preparation, but is especially meant for special feast days. I remember actually the last time I cooked this was for 200 people, and they're still talking about it a year later. Very, very elegant and beautiful. And let's take a look at our ingredients here. Such a colourful arrangement. We've got 1.5 cups of basmati rice. This has been washed and drained, ready for action. We've got half a teaspoon of saffron threads that have been dissolved in 1 tablespoon of hot milk. We have 3 cups of water cooking on the stove, ready to add to our sautéed rice. 2 teaspoons of salt, 3 teaspoons of freshly ground nutmeg powder, 1/4 cup of ghee, clarified butter. We've got 1/4 cup of cashew bits. These are whole cashews that I've smashed up into little pieces. We've got 1/4 cup of raw almond slivers, 3 tablespoons of raisins. These are the dark variety of raisins. Now, along with all the spices here, we've got a teaspoon of fennel seeds, 1-inch cinnamon stick, a teaspoon of cumin seeds, 6 cardamom pods that have been bruised. That means just smashed around a little bit so the flavour comes out of the pods when you cook them up. We've got 6 whole cloves, a teaspoon of coarsely ground black pepper, half a teaspoon of cayenne pepper, half a teaspoon of yellow asafoetida powder. We've got 1/4 cup of green peas that have been slightly, steamed a little bit in order that they're sort of semi-cooked. We've also got 1/4 cup of soft brown sugar, 1/4 cup of coconut, and we've got over here a little bowl with some sautéed pieces of paneer, or Indian fried homemade cheese. This was made from 6 cups of milk. The curd was pressed, deep fried and cut into little pieces. And this is our big block of homemade paneer cheese here. This is made from heating up milk, and when it comes to the boil, adding a curdling agent like lemon juice, citric acid, something sour. The milk separates into curds and whey. You know, Little Miss Muffet, all that sort of stuff. Well, she was eating curds and whey. So this is the curd. The curd cheese is gathered together, put into a cloth, a cheesecloth or a colander if you like, separated from the liquid, pressed, and then it can be cut into cubes. It can be rolled into balls, it can be mashed, it can be put into salads. It's a really, really first-class, versatile food ingredient, and it's very, very popular in Indian cuisine. First thing we're going to do with all these ingredients here is to saute our nuts in our large pot over here in a little bit of ghee. So first of all, let's put half of our ghee in our large pot here. And we're going to saute our cashew nuts and our almond pieces. Slivered almonds are good for this. It's good to be organised when you make pushpana rice because there's lots of little steps involved. It's not the sort of thing you would make for a quick snack, but it really is worthwhile. Now we're just going to saute our nuts until they're a light golden brown, and we're going to take them out with our slotted spoon. Obviously I'm using raw cashews and raw almonds here. Of course, if you have almonds and cashews which are already cooked, you can omit this step, although they do have a lovely flavour when they're sautéed in ghee, so give the raw cashews and almonds a go. It's very nice. Okay, they're done. Let's get our slotted spoon here and take them. Be very careful when you're sautéing cashew nuts and almonds because they only take a few seconds to cook. Now I'm not going to boil these nuts up in the rice, but I'm going to saute all these ingredients along with the raisins also beforehand, and they're all going to be folded in at the very last minute. While the ghee's still hot, let's pop in our raisins. These take about 20 seconds and then they're done. Out they come. This puffs them and gives them a very nice flavour. They do burn easily, so be careful. Out they come. Now let's add our rice. And we're going to saute our rice with a little dash more ghee. Now let's saute our rice now for about 1 or 2 minutes until it goes that delightful whitish colour, which means that when you add the water, those rice grains are going to stay separate as anything. This is the purpose of sauteing rice. It makes a lot of difference. While we're sauteing our rice, we can add 3 ingredients to our boiling water. We've got our saffron, which has been soaking in our milk. Let's make sure we get all those grains of saffron out there. Not going to waste any. We've also got our salt and our nutmeg powder. We'll leave the lid off there, bring it back to the boil, and we're going to add it to our rice as soon as this water comes to the boil. Well, here it comes now. I think we're just about ready to add it. So very carefully, let's add our water to our rice. Like so. And stir it around a little bit. Make sure all those rice grains are off the side of the pot. Okay, the water's coming back to the boil here now. We're going to put our lid back on, turn it down to a simmer. Remember, this is the only time you stir rice. It's the golden rule with fluffy rice. Okay, I'm going to come back in about 15 minutes. I've got a few things to do out the back. See you then. I'm back. Let's have a look at our rice here, shall we? Ooh, hot and steaming, and it looks so delicious. I want to show you something here. See those little air holes? Can you see? There's one there, there's one there, there's one there. They're actually all over the place. These little air holes are caused by the steam inside the rice forcing its way out. And if you don't stir the rice after that initial stirring when the water went in, this means all those little air holes will allow the steam to come out in such a way that all the rice grains cook completely evenly. Have a look at this now. See how all those rice grains are perfectly fluffy and completely separate from each other. This is the advantage of cooking it this method, and it's also the advantage in using a high quality rice like basmati. So let's put the lid back on here. What I'm going to need to do now is to saute some of our spices and mix everything back together again. And this place is a mess as usual, so let me just clear the decks here and make a few arrangements for our frying to go on. Our wok ring. In fact, I'm going to have to take our thing off completely here. Put our wok ring on top. On goes the wok. In goes our ghee. And our first spice we're going to saute up is our fennel seeds. Let's wait for our ghee to heat up, or it's hot already. Let's put our fennel seeds in now, shall we? And our cinnamon stick. Cumin seeds. Our cardamom pods. Our cloves. We're going to saute these for a few seconds until those spices darken a little, which they have. Now we've got, in quick succession, black pepper, we've got our cayenne pepper and our asafoetida, quick succession because we don't want to give them time to burn. Let's just break up that lump of asafoetida. In goes the peas. Let's cool it down a little now, so some of the heat is off, but we can put our sugar in. Now let's put our fried curd cheese, paneer. saute it up. It's all coated in that delicious flavoured ghee. And we've got our nuts, our raisins, and our coconut. Now that's all heating up very nicely. Let's put in our rice. And we're going to saute it all up together for our grand finale. There's some of the rice, fold it all in. And some more. Still a bit more to go in our pot here. I'm just going to, as they say in Australia, bung it in. Give it a good stir. Oh, this is very picturesque indeed. What a feast. Bengali royal rice, pushpanna, fit for a king. Yeasted puris are a very popular variety of North Indian bread. Actually, breads play a very vital role in Indian vegetarian cooking. There's thousands of varieties. Yeasted puris are one of my favourite breads because, being a bread fan myself, these fried breads taste like hot baked bread straight out of the oven. They're very wonderful. The little puffs of wafer-thin bread which are cooked in clarified butter, actually deep fried, until they puff up like big balloons. And they're quite wonderful for tea time, to be served with a full meal or whatever. Actually, they're very, very versatile. Let me show you some of the ingredients that we're going to be using here. This is atta flour. It's made from these whole grains of wheat, which have been powdered up to a very, very fine meal. It's famous as the Indian bread flour. And we're going to use that today along with some unbleached plain flour. Unbleached white flour, if you like, same thing. We're going to mix those two types of flour together to make the basis of our dough. So let's have a look at our ingredients over here, shall we? We've got 1.5 grams, that's about 1/8 of an ounce, of dried yeast. If you'd like to use fresh yeast, you could use about 2 to 3 teaspoons. We've got 3 teaspoons of sugar. We've got a teaspoon of salt, 2 tablespoons of butter, 1 cup of sifted atta flour, chapati flour, 1 cup of unbleached plain flour, and we've got 3/4 of a cup of warm water. Let me show you what to do with all that now, shall I? The first thing we're going to do is activate our yeast. Take a little bit of the warm water, add some sugar, and the yeast. Mix it up till everything dissolves, like so. Now you should put this aside in a warm place for at least 10 minutes. I have a batch over here that I've already made. This is what it looks like after 15 minutes. Next thing we have to do is in our big bowl here, combine the 2 types of flour with our butter and salt in our bowl. So there's the unbleached plain flour, atta flour, salt, and a butter chunk. Big chunk of butter there. Now we have to rub in the butter into the mixture, like so. You should rub in until the mixture resembles a coarse meal. You'll notice as you rub it in, it has almost like a biscuit crumb consistency. I always prefer to use my hands for this sort of operation. It's really the natural way of doing things. Like so. Now we're going to add our yeast mixture plus a little extra water. In goes the yeast mixture. And I think we might require a little extra water. Yes, just a dash. Always very important not to add too much water. You can always add a little bit more as you go along, but once you've added too much, it's pretty disastrous. Oftentimes, if you add too much water, then you have to add more flour, and so it goes on, and if you're not very expert, you end up with 10 times as much dough as what you wanted. The test of a good dough at this stage is you can actually gather it all together in one lump like this, and you can actually clean the whole bowl with your lump of dough. At which time, you can take away the bowl and put the dough down on the table. Now we can knead the dough. Notice here now how the dough has softened up. It's very smooth, soft as butter. Look at that. It's actually very nice. I've actually found out that this is the best way of describing this dough when it's perfectly smooth is it's just like one's earlobe. Everyone hold their earlobes now. That's right. Grab hold of your earlobe and now feel the dough. Very similar, although this is a little flourier than my earlobe. So here's a silken smooth piece of dough. Now what we have to do is rub a little butter on this, like so. Place it in a glass bowl. You can use the same one that you used before. Take a piece of plastic wrap, cover the bowl, and place it in a warm place and come back in about an hour and a half. Well, here's our dough after an hour and a half. I've left it going for a little longer. Amazing, isn't it? You'd hardly believe it's the same piece of dough. See how it's busting its way through the top of the bowl here? Let's take our plastic wrap off. And what we're going to do now is to punch down our dough. This is how you release your inhibitions. Punch the dough. Punch it very hard like this. Of course, I don't have any inhibitions. I'm just faking it. Punch it down, take away the bowl, and you guessed it, turn, fold and lean. For another 1 minute this time only. It's risen like this because of the yeast, of course. As you knead it, it'll shrink back down to its original size. Okay, now we're going to roll it out into a long snake-like object, like so. Now we have to cut it into 16 portions. So cut it in half, half again, and half again. Okay, let's take all our dough aside. Take one piece of dough, roll it into a patty, like so. You might need a little bit of flour on the board at this stage. You can dredge your patty in the flour, like so, and make it into a fairly round object. Take a rolling pin, roll it very carefully like so, and keep rolling, turn over, 45, turn over 90 degrees, roll it out a bit thinner until you end up with a disc about 4.5 to 5 inches wide. Make it as round as you possibly can. Okay, well here's 6 out of our big batch of puris that we've been sitting aside now until they've been puffed and risen. Notice here how they've swollen up. They look a little bit like Middle Eastern breads. They're fat and chubby. Now we've got to deep fry them. What you'll need is a vessel full of ghee or oil heated up to about 185 degrees Celsius or 365 degrees Fahrenheit. You'll need a container to place the cooked puris in. You'll need a colander to catch the drips as you take them out of the ghee, with a slotted spoon, something underneath the colander, and something big like this if you're going to cook more than one at a time. Let's put our puris next to the wok. And really the first thing we need to do is just take one and pop it in like so. Hold it under the surface of the ghee with a slotted spoon, press it down very hard, and here it comes. Woof! Look at that. Like a big balloon. Turn it over. Remarkable things, these puris. They never fail to surprise people when they puff up like this. Bathe it a little bit with hot oil, like so, till it's a little golden brown. Turn it over. Lift it up, shake it off, place it in our colander. Let me show you again. Pop it in, press it down with the back of your slotted spoon, like so. Press very firmly. It'll puff up like a big balloon, like so. Now you can turn it over, splash it a little bit with some ghee in order to keep it warm. So, don't mind me. I'm just going to continue cooking my puris here. This is fun. I could cook these things all day. Khamiri puri, yeasted puris. Another wonderful addition to our Indian feast. Chana dal and potatoes. Here's an example of the economic soundness of a vegetarian diet. This dish features chana dal, which is the husked, split, whole brown chickpeas, a relative of the common garden chickpea, which is very popular in northern Indian cooking. In fact, all over India. It makes a very delicious stew called chole, which is served in the north. But today we're simmering split chana dal with potatoes to make a very nourishing meal. A meal in itself, actually. You could say a one-pot meal. It's very easy to digest, very succulent and tasty. And as far as the economics of this dish is concerned, actually chana dal is rich in protein. So let's take a look at our ingredients over here. We've got 1 cup of chana dal, the split version, which has been soaked and drained. We've got a 1-inch stick of cinnamon. We've got 4 tablespoons of ghee, clarified butter, 2 medium-sized potatoes that were peeled and cut into 1/2-inch cubes, 1½ teaspoons of cumin seeds, 1/4 teaspoon of yellow asafoetida powder, 1½ teaspoons of ground coriander seeds, 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper, 1/2 teaspoon of turmeric, 1 teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of fresh lemon juice, and 2 tablespoons of chopped fresh coriander. So the first thing we're going to do now is to take the lid off our pot here, in which is boiling 1½ cups of water. And we're going to add our dal, our cinnamon stick, and a little splash of ghee. Along with our cinnamon stick and a tablespoon of ghee. Give it a bit of a stir, bring it back to the boil, and allow it to simmer for about 15 minutes. Then we're going to add our potatoes. Upon looking at this, you might wonder, that seems like quite a small amount of water for that much dal. The answer is that actually when this cooks, all the water will disappear. We're going to cook it down in such a way that when the dish is finished, there'll be no more water left in the pot, and each of those little split chana dals will be soft and buttery, along with the little moist chunks of potatoes and a very savoury gravy. And in this way, you end up with a semi-moist, semi-dry dish, which is wonderful served with breads and rice dishes, all sorts of things, even as a part of an ingredient in a feast, which is what we're going to do today. So it's almost coming back to the boil now. Let's help it along by popping our lid back on, and then we're going to turn it down to a simmer. Oh, you beautiful dal, you great big pot full of dal. Let's have a look at our dal here. It's looking half cooked, feeling half cooked. The water's evaporating slightly. It's time to add our potatoes. By the time these potatoes are cooked, the dal will be nice and soft. There'll be practically no moisture left. Then we'll be able to put in our last final seasoning, and it'll be finished. Back with the lid. Let's come back in about 10 minutes or so. My pot is calling me, rattling away there. It must mean that our potatoes and our chana dals are done. But there's one way of telling. Take 1 chana dal and squeeze it between your fingers, rather warm. Take 1 piece of potato. Okay, well it's time to add our final seasoning. Let's rearrange things a little bit here. We're going to fry our spices up in our cast iron pan. These are great for this sort of thing. Let's get some ghee. Let's pour it in. We're only seconds from completion now. And the first thing we're going to do when the ghee heats up, which it is indeed, is to fry up our cumin seeds. Saute our cumin seeds until they go a golden brown. And our asafoetida. Coriander powder. Cayenne pepper. Wonderful aroma coming out of this pot. Turmeric. The salt. Okay, let's pop this into our pan. Get all those cumin seeds out of there. We don't want to waste one of those savoury little things. Let's give it a good stir here. Fold all those lovely things together. Careful not to crush those potatoes. If you want, you can add a little moisture if you prefer something a little more juicy. But we're going to add a little lemon juice to this too now. And not only that, but some fresh coriander leaves to give it an extra lift. And there we have it, a delightful, aromatic pot of chana dal and potatoes, a one-pot meal in itself. Well, that's it for this edition of Cooking with Kurma. I do hope you'll enjoy preparing these dishes as much as I've enjoyed sharing them with you. Happy and healthy eating.